Warning: distressing content. Aaliyah, Laianah and Trey had their whole lives ahead of them. Each one of them could light up the room. The eldest Aaliyah, 6, so articulate and bright, was reading ahead of her year at school and told stories to her younger siblings. She was physically fit and strong, always trying to copy her mother's CrossFit routines. In her grandmother's words, a good kid. A strong child. 4-year-old Laianah, Little Middle, or Gracie Girl, was the craziest of the trio. She did things to make the others laugh, playing the role of the little dynamo in the hectic family life. Trey, only 3, was the apple of his mother's eye and very much a mummy's boy. Sweet but sporty, he knew how to kick and pass a football at only 3. He had the makings of a sports star. Camera icon Aaliyah, Laianah and Trey, Hannah Clarke's children. Supplied. Then there was their mum Hannah Clarke, bright, bubbly and full of empathy. She embodied selflessness, but still had a competitive edge in the gym. Her soul touched the lives of everyone she knew and her smile was infectious. In their beaming, bubbly photos they were the perfect portrait of family life. But on February 19, 2020, their lives ended in an instant. The 4 had just left her parents' Camp Hill home when Hannah's vengeful, tempestuous ex-husband Rowan Baxter, furious at his wife's newfound love of life and happiness and grappling with the loss of his idyllic family image, did the ultimate, unthinkable act. Camera icon Hannah Clarke. News Corp Australia. Armed with a knife and jerrycan full of fuel, he ambushed the mum of 3 and forced his way into the car. Furious Baxter demanded Hannah drive, as she screamed for him to get out of the car. In a heroic final act to protect her children, she defied her violent ex's threat, pulling the car up to a driveway in Jirimble Street after it traveled some 200 m down the road. Call the police, he's trying to me, he's poured petrol on me, she cried to Michael Zemek as he was washing his car. Camera icon the scene where Hannah and her children were aired by Baxter in February 2020. News Corp Australia. Suddenly, the car exploded. Windows across the street rattled from the explosion. Hannah and Baxter were consumed by the flames as neighbors desperately attempted to hose down the screaming mother. A thick plume of black smoke could be seen across the neighborhood. Aaliyah, Laianah and Trey, who were strapped in the car's back seat, perished in the flames. Covered head to toe in severe burns, Hannah bravely recounted as much as she could to emergency services who raced to the scene. Tragically, she in hospital hours later. Baxter, looking pan and resigned, retrieved the knife from the burning wreck and took his own life, as others attempted to extinguish the fire. Camera icon An inquest into the S of Hannah, Rowan Baxter, and their 3 children ran for 2 weeks at Brisbane Coroner's Court. News Corp Australia. The heinous of Hannah and her children scarred the nation. It led to an outcry and outpouring of grief at the loss of the young mum's beautiful soul, thrusting Australia's domestic violence scourge onto the international stage. Tributes were made, memorials were held, and politicians bowed their heads and acknowledged the horror of what had unfolded in their nation's streets. Camera icon Hannah had separated from Baxter several months before the horrific. News Corp Australia. The lives of Sue and Lloyd Clarke, Hannah's devastated parents, were shattered irreparably at the loss of their daughter and grandchildren. Now, 2 years on from the horror, a coronial inquest is shining a light on the backdoor dealings at what seemed like the idyllic family. The trauma was already well known, so it needed to start by looking backwards. What warning signs, if any, were missed? Camera icon Lloyd and Sue Clarke, Hannah's parents, arrive at the inquest in Brisbane. Liam Kidston, News Corp Australia. What contact did Hannah have with support services before the heinousing? What changes should be made to stop another horrific act just like this from occurring? Over 2 weeks the court would slowly piece together many things that were hiding in plain sight. An abusive, unhappy marriage. A disturbing portrait of Baxter's psychopathic, manipulative, and controlling behaviors towards Hannah and even the kids. The fleeting moments the four could have been protected, and the powerlessness of authorities to do so. Red flags in a broken marriage. The moment Sue Clarke lay her eyes on Rowan Baxter, she didn't like him. Baxter, carrying the swagger of an ex-footballer and packing a stocky, muscled build, he was 11 years older than their 20-year-old daughter. He was still living with his former partner when Hannah introduced him to her parents, which he said was purely for his child. Camera icon Baxter was 11 years older than Hannah when he was first introduced to the family. News Corp Australia. At the time, no one knew Rowan had contemplated his ex-partner and his son in a dramatic suicide, having told an old friend he'd driven to the woman's house armed with a rope, tape and a knife. Despite their reservations, Rowan won the Clarkes over. Sue described him as being lovely for the first few years of the marriage. But when the children arrived, their relationship soured. I don't know whether he was putting on a good front and it was getting too hard to keep putting up the facade, or the stress of opening the gym, but in all honesty I don't know, Sue told the inquest. Hannah and Rowan ran their business, Integer 8 and CrossFit SMC, in Mansfield. Sue said she invested money into the gym to help get the pair on their feet, something she said may have caused Rowan to feel like he was owned by the Clarkes. Whatever the case, Rowan treated his mother-in-law terribly. Camera icon The Inquest was told Baxter was rude to people in his gym and especially rude to Hannah's mum. Supplied. Apart from berating other paying customers in the gym as fat and lazy, he told Sue she never needed to be there. During one exercise while supporting Sue, Rowan dropped her, causing her to split her face open. He then laughed at her, much to the open shock of other members of the gym and her own husband. He told me to harden up, that it happens all the time when you played football, Sue said. When Hannah misbehaved in Rowan's eyes, he would punish Sue by not allowing her to mind the children. If Sue ever spoke out, she would get teary calls from her daughter begging her to apologize to Rowan. After Hannah went back to work, Rowan schemed to try and interfere with Sue's contact with the children, planning days off from his job so she wouldn't be able to mind them. Being around Rowan was like walking on eggshells. Camera icon Hannah's mother Sue Clarke gave evidence at the inquest into the S of her daughter and grandchildren. NCA Newswire, Dan Peled, News Corp Australia. I could never say what I thought, Sue said. As the inquest progressed, a disturbing portrait of the New Zealand-born Baxter and his seemingly idyllic marriage to Hannah emerged. Baxter would demand sex from Hannah every day, at times choking her during the act. Hannah's friends said she wasn't allowed to wear shorts or the color pink on Baxter's orders. He alone decided who she could and couldn't see. Even during training sessions, Baxter would become jealous and angry if his wife performed better than him and attempt to undermine her achievements by accusing her of cheating or not doing routines properly. Kylie Buss gave evidence Baxter would call Hannah fat behind closed doors, berating her body image while saying she needed to lose weight and get back in shape. Camera icon Kylie Buss. News Corp Australia, David Clarke. Aaliyah, Laianah and Trey fared no better. They were only possessions in Baxter's eyes and he was unusually rough with each of them. Nicole Brooks, Hannah's childhood friend, recalled one incident where Baxter knocked Aaliyah into a doorframe while the pair were play fighting. The impact split the young girl's head open. Camera icon Nicole Brooks, Hannah's friend. News Corp Australia. She told the inquest another time, he decided the children would take part in a post-workout ice bath with him. A screaming Trey, his eyes bulging with fear, was nearly submerged in the freezing water. They hated every minute of it. Bizarrely, Baxter would film some of these experiences and post them to his business's Facebook page. And even though Aaliyah feared her father immensely, she often stood up to him. Sue told the court Baxter would storm out during fights with Hannah, where the youngster would slam the door behind him and defiantly shout, "And don't come back." Camera icon Hannah Clarke's children in happier times. Supplied. If he sulked and refused to speak to Hannah,